I'm Alan Davies, and these are my questions and ancestors. Oh, wow.
Wow.
That makes you inclined to go and wander down the street that he walked down.
My goodness, that is
That's a high honour.
a high honour, exactly.
He was a hero.
There are so many people, and then once they've passed, they're just sort of gone in a puff of smoke. That to be able to dig out a clipping and find a little bit of information.
Hang on, Alan.
Slow
I'm
down.
obsessed with this
I
Mountie.
know, but it'll all be revealed in good time. Hello, I'm Alex Jones, and welcome back to Questions and Ancestors, brought to you by Ancestry. Have you ever wondered about your family history and where your story really starts? Perhaps you've got unanswered questions about the missing branches of your family tree, or you'd like to know more about the ancestors that made you who you are. I know I have. But this series is about digging deep into the family histories of my well-known guests, with the expert help of Ancestry's senior genetic genealogist, Laura House, revealing what her team have uncovered. And as ever, I'll be asking our star names to reflect on how learning about their ancestral past will shape them going forward. Now, I'm especially looking forward to seeing if there's any Welsh connections for today's guest, given his surname. He's a much-loved, award-winning comedian, actor, presenter and writer. The only permanent panellist on the long-running BBC panel show QI, and still holds a fond place in people's hearts for his title role in BBC mystery series Jonathan Creek, which I absolutely loved. Later this year, he is hitting the road for his first stand-up tour in a decade and has recently been looking into his past for his latest best-selling and very personal memoir, White Male Stander. I'm so excited to be joined on today's Questions and Ancestors by the wonderful Alan Davies. Well, Alan, a big welcome. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Now then, who is the unofficial historian in your family? Is there somebody that's traced your family back?
Well, yes. It was my Uncle Michael. My Uncle Michael passed away quite recently.
Oh.
In his 80s.
I'm sorry.
But he was the kind of older relative who really presided over everything and had a family tree that he'd written out and accumulated. The family was very important to him. And he was my mum's, wasn't actually my uncle, he's a cousin, he's my mum's cousin. And he was an only child, and my mum had a younger sister, and the three of them pretty much grew up together.
Right.
And so my Auntie Hazel, she died about 2007, I think, so, and my mum in the 70s. So he's sort of seen them both go. But he was a person he was quite parental towards me, actually, in lots of ways. And he would invite family members to when he had a big birthday, like when he was 75, he had about 3 parties, and he would invite family members, say that this is your cousin from such and such, this is your cousin, and you would meet these people that you didn't know existed, and in a way you need someone like that in a family, I think.
You do. So Michael thought it was important that you all knew who each other was. I mean, he sounds great. He sounds like he sort of wanted to keep the family connected.
Well, he really did. And I didn't know anything about my mum, really. I mean, the memories of my mum are kind of quite sparse.
Well, you were young when you lost your mum, weren't you?
I was only 6. And when I wrote a memoir called Just Ignore Him, and in that I resolved to write literally everything I could remember about her.
Well, I've read that. I'm just about to finish it. I'm reading it now. And it's incredible what you can remember. The detail. I don't know how you've managed it.
Well, that process took a while. And you have to learn to sort of trust the way you write about memory, because, of course, you can't really remember what you did yesterday, you know.
No.
So it's a kind of version. And the memories that you do have are ones that repeat and repeat and repeat. So in the process of writing that book, I discovered quite a lot of the things that I remembered couldn't actually have been in the order that I remembered them as.
No.
You know, and I had to kind of really reorganise my memories a bit. But I told Michael that I didn't know where my mum, I mean anything, where she grew up, where she went to school. I had the name of a street. And he took me round Chingford, where I was born, and he showed me the house that she grew up in. And we were standing staring at it. And there was a man in the doorway, and I said to him, "I'm so sorry we're staring at your house." But the reason is it's where my mum grew up. And he said, "Do you want to come in?"
Lovely.
And he said, and I said, "I'd love to." And he said, "That's fine. Come in, have a look round." So we did.
And how did you feel?
Well, I was just listening to Michael, and he's saying that window's the same. That room wasn't like this. This passageway was exactly the same. That's where she used to sit. The bedroom's there. And then he took me up the hill from there and showed me her old school, which is now quite a famous school because it's a school that David Beckham and Harry Kane both went to.
Was she a good footballer?
I don't know, maybe. Maybe she'd have been in the Lionesses.
Maybe. Who knows? But sometimes you feel more connected to a person by going back to these places.
Well, yes, and there were people that I didn't know about too. I mean, he took me to a graveyard and showed me several Davises.
Wow.
And quite a few Davises were lost in the First World War. And so he showed me a few things that I had no idea about. And then he told me all about bomb damage from the Blitz and how, for a time, they were bombed out and had to live somewhere else. And he showed me how that house was bombed out. We had to move here for a bit, but while that was getting repaired and all of that. And I did know, I remember my father did tell me that a doodle bug landed at the end of their road and blew all the windows in, and they were all hiding under the dining room table. I know that my mum's mum was called Fanny Binks.
What a name.
Fanny Binks, it sounds like a Dickensian character.
I mean, it's amazing.
And there is one, I have one photo, or a photocopy of a photo, which I think is from about 1905-ish, which has got my grandmother age 5 in it, in a little dress, and a big family gathering. It looks like a wedding, but I don't know whose wedding it is. And in that, there is Nelson Freeman, who was my great-grandfather, and
Okay.
Fanny Binks. And you can see a Fanny Binks in the picture. But what my Granny Price said to me was she can remember seeing her mum, Fanny, through the school railings, and then looking back, and she was gone, and she never saw her again.
What?
So she...
Why? Do we know?
Nelson Freeman had a wife and had some children, and I think she died. Then he was with Fanny for a bit, and then Fanny was gone.
My gosh.
And then my granny was kind of raised by her half-sisters, who she said used to, when they were brushing her hair, they would occasionally hit her on the head with the hairbrush. That's one of her memories. So she was quite troubled, my Granny Price, and she had some episodes and had some time spent on wards having electric shock treatment and various harrowing things.
We ask, every guest that we have on the podcast, we ask them to bring a document because, of course, this would be a digital record for your ancestors in years to come. And I think the picture that you just spoke about is what you wanted to bring. But in fact, you can't find the
I'll dig
actual
it out. I will
thing.
find it.
So
It must be at home somewhere.
do you think it's at home? When
Yeah.
did you last see it?
A few years ago, but it'll be in a box. I'm a bit of a hoarder and I'm not organised.
But
So
why?
I just need to go through a lot of boxes.
Yes. But why is it when we asked you to bring a document, it could have been anything. It could have been a certificate. It could have been anything at all, a newspaper clipping. Why was it that was the photograph that you wanted to bring?
Well, it's really, those are my ancestors, or there's some of them. It's quite difficult, isn't it? Once you get to great-grandparents, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And
Tell us.
and most of them are really, it's completely unknown who they are.
So you've got Uncle Michael to thank for piecing some of your history together. But of course, poor Uncle Michael is no longer with us. And so there are details, of course, that are missing. You talked about your mother's side, maybe wanting to know a little bit more about her side of the family. What are you most curious about, Alan?
I know on my dad's mum's side, the Peachey family, and they're quite well known, they're a big building firm, and I know about that side a bit. And they were bricklayers, and then he started his own building company and built a lot of the suburbs of northeast London he was responsible for.
Oh, gosh.
But they started out as a bricklaying team, and so they lived in Islington, so they probably worked on St Pancras Station. There were nearly 1,000 bricklayers worked on that. So I have the little snippets of some history of some people.
And then with the Peacheys, are there any details missing there?
I found out about one relative that I liked the sound of, and he lost a leg in the war, and then he emigrated to Canada, and then he joined the Mounties and became a one-legged Mountie. And I thought,
goodness me, it's the hero
honestly,
of the family.
If you said, sometimes people say, imagine you could go back in time, where would you go? I would be hard-pressed to beat that. It's my great uncle.
Well, who knows? I mean, we might have dug into that particular uncle's story. I say no more. All right, let's properly introduce Ancestry's senior genealogist, Laura House. Laura is incredible at her job, and she has some of your family history there, which she will uncover. But it's always nice to have a little hint, a little tease of something maybe unexpected. Can you give that to us?
Yeah, Alan, you mentioned your great uncle on the Peachey side of the family. And what's interesting about that story is there are elements of truth all over it.
Okay.
But perhaps not in the places you might expect.
Ah!
Was it an arm, not a leg or something?
We'll find out.
Before we dive into what Laura's found, we'll talk about your tour a little bit, because you're back on tour in the autumn.
Yes, I am.
Think Ahead is the title. Have you thought ahead? Have you written it? Because most comedians, they go, I'm going on tour, but I haven't written it yet.
You're safe, because this tour is a kind of an extension of last year's tour. So I can safely say show's really good.
Okay, brilliant.
It's really good. It's
Excellent.
gone down a storm. And
What are the topics then?
Well, the topics are, in part, it's quite a lot family-oriented, actually. So there's a lot about parenting, and there's a lot about my own childhood experiences, some of which were not good and have not previously been kind of incorporated into my stand-up. But from writing 2 volumes of memoir recently, because the new book I've written, White Male Stand-Up, is kind of part 2, I think of it as, after Just Ignore Him. So there's a lot about my father and losing my mum, and so that's all in the stand-up show. But to create stand-up about that has meant I've had to really build around it some very funny routines about erectile dysfunction, and that's been very popular with the audience.
I'm sure it has.
And the show's been very gratifying, because for me it feels as though it's a more complete version of myself, really. As a comedian, you're always putting some sort of front on, obviously, to the audience, and you're creating a persona, or a persona develops over time that you slip into when you get the microphone in your hand, and quite often that's a facade. Behind that, who knows what's going on, and Tears of a Clown's a bit of a cliche, but it's often the case that there's something unsaid in a lot of performers' backgrounds, and so to try to create a show which incorporates some of the unsaid has been what I intended to do. And I think it's taken me, I'm 60 now, it's taken me a long time to be ready to properly, I describe it as presenting the whole cake with no ingredients left out.
Yeah.
And so I feel as though this is the best show that I've done, and the response has been, I didn't know how people would respond, but the response has been really gratifying. And so I'm going to New Zealand in August, and then I'm going to go around the UK in September, October.
Fantastic. You mentioned the second volume, which is the White Male Stand-Up, and I can't wait to read this one as well. But turning it, and as you say, incorporating it into your stand-up routine is kind of, this is it in black and white, bare, bones, painful, and then having to find a funny way around it. Does that make it somewhat cathartic and help you to process it in a different way?
My father died in 2023, and at the beginning of 2024, I started to work on a new stand-up show without thinking, now he's passed away, I can really
go for it.
It just kind of came out, and it sort of shows how significant that moment was, really, even though we were completely estranged in the last few years. But what I realised was going on through my kind of adult life was really, it was about a search for family, and it took writing the book to sort of discover that. really. And, we write to find out the things that we don't know about ourselves. That's one of the kind of mantras of the writing course that I did about 10 years ago now. And that's what happened to me. So that's what that book became. So whilst there are as many funny stories as I could find from my comedy career, there's still my trademark despondency.
Let's now dive in and learn a little bit more about what's made Alan, possibly.
Okay.
So, Laura, what can we tell Alan then as an overview? Where are you going to start?
We're going to start with your paternal grandmother, Dora Peachey. And we're going to start with a document. And this document is the 1911 census. You can find the 1911 census of England and Wales on Ancestry. And this record shows your family recorded on census night, your Peachey family, your paternal grandmother's family. And the person that we're going to be focusing on in this story is highlighted in this document, if you'd like to take a look.
Oh, yeah.
And this record is handwritten by your great-grandfather, who is the first person listed on the document.
Oh, so you've highlighted Roger Peachey. I like Roger Peachey's because my middle name is Roger.
Is it?
So surely there must be a connection.
Alan Roger Davies?
Yeah. And I often say to people, guess my middle name, and no one ever gets it.
Well, everybody will know now. So Roger Peachey was Alan's great-uncle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's on this 1911 census record with his parents and his siblings. He's working as a journalist, interestingly. And as you say, his father's a builder's contractor, so exactly like you say in the building trade. And Roger migrates to Canada a year after this document is taken, in 1912, so before the First World War.
Before the war. But he becomes the Mountie?
Hang on. Alan.
Slow
I'm
down.
obsessed with this Mountie.
I know. But it'll all be revealed in good time.
I'll hold my horses. I've done
Hold
that.
my horses. Love that, yeah.
Now, an absolutely fantastic find, and I was so excited when I came across this document on Ancestry, was Roger's military record, his service record for the First World War, that explains the injury that you heard about in your family story.
Oh.
We're going to look at a couple of pages of this record. It's a massive document. I really do recommend you go online and read the whole thing because it's so interesting. But we're going to focus on the key 2 pages. And the first one will tell you a bit more about the injury itself. So that's what we're going to look at first.
Read what you can out loud for us.
Here, give a description of wounds. Amputation, right leg. Well, that's pretty clear. Did the disabling condition have its origin before enlistment? No. Has it been aggravated by service? Not applicable. What is the probable duration in months of the disability? Permanent.
That's quite a big full stop there,
Yeah.
isn't it? Permanent. So your great-uncle Roger, so he emigrates to Canada.
Yeah.
Then serves.
At the outbreak of the First World War, he enlists.
Okay.
And he is in the Canadian Mounted Rifles.
Aha.
And this, I think, is where the Mountie story comes from.
Yes.
You see, everybody's got these myths, haven't they, Alan, and their family, and you sort of had a little inkling about the story. But
Yes.
here we are to iron it all out.
Yes.
Okay, so he has been injured.
Yes. So
And
he's
then-
had an amputation. The service record describes that he was wounded initially. The wound became septic and he had to have the amputation.
I see. And which document are you suggesting now that Alan goes to have a look at?
This is the First World War Canadian service record
Fine.
of Roger Peachey.
Because lots of people will enjoy, won't they, researching their family history. And if they had any members of the family who had served, presumably anybody can look at this similar sort of document.
Yes, there's fantastic military record coverage on Ancestry. So anyone who has an ancestor who was an adult during the First World War, I absolutely recommend that you look them up and see if you can find their service record because there's so much information in there. It's just incredible. Sometimes you get letters written by the ancestor. Sometimes you get descriptions of their medals. You get a complete record of service, all the countries they travelled to. These records are just extraordinary.
My goodness. Is that something that you'd be interested in? Alan?
Yeah. Well, it says there he had an artificial limb.
So did he continue then to serve? What happened to Uncle Roger?
He did leave the army after the injury. Of course, he couldn't continue to serve when he had his leg amputated, but he was fitted with an artificial limb, as you say. He had a great deal of difficulty. He had been a builder, like many of the other Peacheys, living in Canada prior to the war. And of course, he couldn't continue with that job after he'd had this injury. He had a lot of pain. It's all described in the service record. He endured a lot of pain even after he had fully recovered. He could only walk a certain amount of time before he had to stop. It was a very different lifestyle for him after the First World War.
Well, it's a life-changing injury, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as it says very clearly, permanent. Was he ever recognised then for his service?
He was. And this is really beautiful. There is a section of the service record that talks about Roger being awarded the Military Cross.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And it explains why he was given this award. And I would love for you to read this out about your great uncle Roger, because I think it's so lovely.
Let me see. For conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty, while acting as battalion intelligence officer, he took up a forward position with his observers. When the leading company jumped off, he accompanied them so as to keep in touch with the situation. One of the platoons being held up by machine gun fire, he took one of the scouts, made a flank movement and captured the gun and crew, enabling the advance to continue. His courage was a fine example to all ranks.
My goodness. I mean, the Military Cross is, you know, that is
That's a high honour.
a high honour, exactly.
He was a hero.
Brave Roger.
So a war hero then in Great
Yeah.
Uncle
Do
Roger.
You do wonder when you read things like that and you think about how young all those men were.
Yeah. Do we know actually how old Roger was then?
I can find out.
Because sometimes that puts it into perspective,
It
doesn't
really
it? You
does.
imagine them as sort of older men, but of course
You
he
think
wouldn't
of
have
the life
been.
that you've led and the life that your children lead and what those people had to do.
Exactly.
So if he was 18 in 1911, then this is 1918, 7 years
Oh,
later,
so, yeah, it's 25. Or
25.
maybe around
25.
then, just-
25 years old.
25 been awarded the Military Cross.
Yeah. Extraordinary achievement.
So is that a better version of the story than you thought you knew?
The one-legged Mountie story. Yeah, it's extraordinary. Yes, I had no idea he was a war hero and he was awarded like that.
Yeah, incredible bravery.
So what happened to Uncle Roger after the war then?
There's two parts to your Mountie story.
Uh-huh.
One is that Roger was in the mounted police, so he was riding horses. That part, the horse part, clearly comes from the service record. Comes
Yes.
from the fact that his military service, he was in the Mounties. The second part is him being in the police. And there's truth to that story as well, but these are actually two separate stories.
Oh, right.
So he was mounted in the army, and then when he joined the police, he was no longer riding horses. Of course, he couldn't because of his disability. But he was in the police, and he became incredibly successful.
Wow.
Incredibly successful.
How successful, Laura?
Well, for that, we're going to take a look at Roger's obituary, which is a very, very beautiful document because it has a photograph.
Oh, really?
So we get to look at Roger. And the people viewing at home get to look at Roger as well.
Oh, let's have a look at
And
him.
if you read Roger's obituary, you get a full description of his police career.
Oh, former commissioner of the British Columbia Provincial Police. A native of London, England, Mr. Peachey was awarded the Military Cross. He joined the BC Police in 1920 and became commissioner in 1948. He is survived by the widow Constance Gertrude. Oh, what a
a
great
name.
Well, there he is. What a life.
Mm.
Wow.
Is there any resemblance to the Alan Davies that sits in front of us?
That's not for me to say.
Well, let's have a look.
Alex?
No.
No. Well, I mean, he's a very dapper-looking man, isn't he? I mean, by this point, and I'm not sure how old he was when he died, it doesn't say, does it? But he looks late 70s, I'd say.
Yeah, could
Maybe
be.
early 70s. But yes, I mean, he obviously, as a young man, had gone to Canada and then achieved an incredible career off the back of it. You know, served, lost his leg, and then became very high up in the police.
Yeah. Commissioner.
You know, when you hear these stories, and obviously this has been somewhat of a myth in your family about, you know, this Mountie great Uncle Roger, what does it leave you with, you know, when those details are filled in? How do you feel now?
Well, funnily enough, I'm going to New Zealand on tour, and on the way back, I'm stopping one night in Vancouver to visit a friend of mine. I used to go to Canada every summer to do fringe festivals when I was a young comedian. When I was the age that Roger was when he got the Military Cross, I was doing stand-up sets in Vancouver.
How different.
That's a very different life indeed. 70 years later or whatever it was, you know. And I'm visiting, and so now that place has a different meaning, and there's an address on there, or a place where he was with Constance Gertrude, and
Yeah.
so it makes you inclined to go and wander down the street that he walked down. And some people's lives are defined by the trauma that they suffer or they endure, or changed by. Who knows what might have become of him without that war, you know, and that's true of tens of millions of people, isn't it?
Mm.
And if you come out with one leg, you're luckier than most. But it's amazing. It's amazing. And there are so many people, and then once they've passed, they're just sort of gone in a puff of smoke, aren't they? And there's no record almost. But to be able to dig out a clipping and find a little bit of information, it's great, really.
And a photograph.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, despite a very, very bad injury, he's gone on to achieve great things.
Yeah. I have a career there in the police for so long.
Yeah. We love that, Laura. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Now, the other thing I was wondering about you, and you might have wondered about yourself, is why on earth you have a Welsh surname.
Yes.
And I don't know whether officially Davies is a Welsh surname, but I mean, we had loads of them in school,
Yeah.
you know? Do you think it's a Welsh surname?
We were always told as children that the E, although it's silent in the Davies, is what makes it Welsh.
There you are.
And so when, in the 70s when I was growing up, the Wales rugby team was fantastic.
Thriving. Unlike now.
And full of Davieses.
Yes.
And when I did stand-up shows in Cardiff, I'd go on and say any Davieses in, you know, and we had dozens of them. Land of my fathers. I learned subsequently that there are some surnames in Wales that are very common because, of course, in the Welsh language, the way families were named for centuries is very different from the English language.
It is.
And so surnames were largely imposed by the English. And it's the story of Wales, and it's a story also of Scotland and Ireland to some extent.
Yeah.
So you can run into a bit of difficulty trying to trace it back, but I don't actually know if there's any Welsh there or not.
Well, shall we find out? I'm just so glad I've got a very rare surname, you know. Jones, nobody's heard of that one. So, is there a Welsh connection? Is Alan, in fact, one of us?
Yeah.
Let's find out.
Yeah, as to the question of why you have a Welsh surname, Alan, the answer may shock you.
Yes.
We have a document here, the 1861 census for your great-great-great-grandparents, Edward and Catherine Davies. And I would like you to take a look at this document and look at their birthplaces on this record. Can you see Edward Davies?
Edward Davies in the middle there. Does that say Wales South?
It does.
South Wales?
He's from South Wales.
Yes, Alan.
There is Welsh.
I knew. I liked you.
Edward.
A Welsh surname because you are Welsh.
I've got a nephew called Edward.
Oh.
Have you really?
Edward Davies, yeah.
What about Catherine? Was she?
Both Welsh. Yeah.
So there is Welsh.
Yeah.
There you are.
And I was told there was no Welsh.
Who told you there was
I was
no
told
Welsh?
for years that there was Welsh. And I really like the fact that so many of these documents are just handwritten.
Yeah.
56 years old, dairyman / tobacconist from South Wales.
And you see, I would love to take all the credit for making this discovery of Alan's Welshness, but the truth is, anyone with ancestors can go on Ancestry and make these discoveries using these records. It's all right there.
Well,
So next time
we're probably related
We
then,
are.
Alec.
And next time you're in Cardiff or Swansea doing a gig,
Land of my fathers.
the shout out will mean so much more.
Yeah,
You can now back it up
it's back.
with, you know, knowledge that you are in fact Welsh
I can
yourself.
now tell my kids. You're Welsh.
So, are your children interested? Because you clearly are. It's as you said earlier on, knowing about our families is often what sort of gives us all those details that we search for our lifetime, aren't they? Are your children interested in your lineage?
It's hard to tell.
A bit early.
My 14-year-old, it's hard to tell what he's interested in. But one of the reasons I set about writing these 2 volumes of memoir that I've written in the last few years is for their benefit, really, to try and show them what my life was and who their relatives are and where it came from. And it's there as a kind of record for them should they want to read it years down the line, And I think there's a real curiosity because my parents, everything's kind of shrouded in mystery and there isn't much to go on. And I think it's what I have noticed with all 3 of my kids, but particularly my youngest one, is how they're very curious. He's curious because he's 10 now and his brother and sister are 4 and 5 years older than him. So sometimes we'll be around the table talking about something that happened when he wasn't born. And what he doesn't say it now, but what he used to say was, "But where was I?" And we would say, "You didn't exist yet. You weren't born." And he'd say, Yeah. But where was I?
Yeah.
Which is such a sort of existential question.
It's a huge question, isn't it?
It's very hard to explain. We don't know. I mean,
No.
he still can't get his head around that he didn't exist. But that curiosity for him extends to his own immediate family. For me, it's nearly all of it was shrouded until I was taken around Chingford by Uncle Michael.
At the beginning, Alan, you were saying there were some gaps in your dad's side of the family. But now some of those details have been filled in. Is that quite nice?
Yes, it is nice. I mean, the most extraordinary story was always about the one-legged Mountie. And it's sort of almost like a kind of a joke figure, but it's very much not a joke figure.
No.
He's a military cross-winning commissioner of police. And now this little detail about this relative from South Wales. Yeah, it's great.
Because sometimes the rumour in families can be sort of better than the reality. These people, these figures take on sort of nearly a heroic presence. But actually, Uncle Roger, great Uncle Roger, was even better than you thought.
Yeah.
Which rarely happens.
Yeah, and maybe that's why I've got his name.
Maybe it is.
Maybe, because again, it's one of the things that's never explained,
So who will you share this information with? Who's the first person that you'll go, you never guess what?
Well, it's got to be my children, because they're carrying the genes. So, yeah, all these documents and all these things that you found, it'd be nice to pore over with them,
Yeah.
If I can peel them off their various devices for 5 minutes.
For 5 minutes. But it would make a great project, wouldn't it? When the school says, pick a relative or somebody from the past and, write about them. I mean, great Uncle Roger's there for the taking, surely.
Yeah. And I hope we never have another major war like that, but to send these boys into these situations, or young men, and who knows what they're going to have to do and how they're going to face it. It must have been absolutely terrifying.
Oh my gosh, of course. And it gives, when you talk about it as a family with your children, it sometimes also gives them a different perspective on the life that they lead, knowing that somebody of nearly the same age endured that. Sometimes you have to have somebody in the family that they can compare with.
Yeah, while they're being terrifically impatient about Deliveroo.
Exactly. Does the revelations that we've heard today with Laura, does it make you want to do a little bit more digging?
Well, yeah. I mean, the fact that so much of it's sitting there, all this documentation's just there online, and you realise that, you could quite easily just have a look, So, yeah, it would be interesting to have a fish about.
There could be a third memoir.
Yeah, there could.
What I didn't know, but what I know now.
Well, I'm still intrigued by Fanny Binks.
I think we need to do another episode all about her, just based on the fact that she has the most extraordinary name.
Yeah.
Fanny Binks. Who was she? What do we know? If you've enjoyed Alan's episode and would like to see him on tour in the autumn, where can people get tickets, Alan?
You can go to alandavies.live, which
Oh.
is my promoter's website for me. It's Alan Davies with an E, obviously, Welsh,
And now we know why.
.live. And they're on there. Or if you're in New Zealand, livenation.nz, I think.
Okay. Google it.
Yeah.
That's always the answer. But also, just a little reminder about Alan's white male stand-up as well.
Yes, paperback out imminently.
There you are, the paperback, and of course the first memoir as well, if you want the whole back catalogue on Alan. They're both well worth a read. Alan, thank you so much. I can't believe that we've already come to the end of the first series of Questions and Ancestors. I've loved every second. I like seeing the guests' reaction when they find out about little nuggets about their family history. Gaps are being filled for them, and the joy on their face is lovely, and they all react very differently. And of course, finding out about my own family with Laura has been wonderful. And you too can start your own ancestral adventure and answer some of the questions you may have about your own family tree with a 14-day free trial at ancestry.co.uk. And wherever you are listening or watching this podcast right now, why not press the follow or subscribe button? You can help others to find us. All you need to do is leave a review or comment. And while you're there, why not press play for more fascinating family histories from my other guests, including fellow comedy stars Sally Phillips and Clive Anderson, actor and director Adrian Lester, and multi-Olympic champion Victoria Pendleton. Questions and Ancestors is brought to you by Ancestry. So Laura, on the last episode, you used my Ancestry DNA test to find out a little bit more about my maternal grandmother, who's called Joan Evans. And I can't wait to find out what other gems you're going to bring to me today. So when you're ready, I'm all ears.
I loved researching this family. And I found this Harris family, the household of your grandmother's dad, John
Yes.
Harris, when he was a younger man living with his parents, Howell and Rebecca Harris.
Yes.
And I'm going to show you them on the 1911 census, and you will see that Howell is also a butcher, like John later.
Yes, he is. Butcher helper.
But he is employed, whereas John is self-employed. So you see they move up in the world as the generations go on.
Yes, and I do remember now Mum saying that they did have a butchery.
Yes. And Howell and Rebecca had a grand total of 11 children.
Wow. Well done them.
So that's a record.
Like rabbits.
And they have 8 of them at home with them on census night, even though all the children are adults.
Well, I can see because you have 27, 25, 23. The youngest actually is 13.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, adopted son.
Yes.
Oh, John Idris Evans, adopted son, 13. What's the story there?
So the story there is that you can see that your family were living very comfortably. In later years, they employ a servant. At this point, they've got so many working adults living in one household.
Yeah.
And John Idris Evans was born in 1898 to Thomas and Carolyn Evans. And Carolyn died suddenly of childbed fever.
Oh, no. Oh my gosh. So in birth then?
Yeah. Yeah, she'd
Wow.
had so many children already, and she was 41 years old, so she must have thought she was nearly done.
Yeah.
And then she ended up getting sick after having her youngest child. And John was still a little boy at that point. And your family took him in and looked after him.
I love that. That is just lovely, isn't it, to know that it feels nice to know that you've come from a place of kindness.
Yeah.
That's
definitely.
great. Wow. I don't think my mum knew about that. I
Now
mean,
you get
they
to
might
tell
have
her.
kept it quiet, mightn't they?
And the last thing I want to show you from this part of your family is, because that census doesn't mention your grandma because she wasn't born yet, but there is a newspaper article that does mention her, and it is the wedding announcement of your Auntie Teg.
Oh, let me see. Cumgorse wedding. Big news in Cumgorse. a tabernacle chapel where I think my mum and dad got married as well. It took place yesterday. Of Miss Tegman Harris, eldest daughter of Mr. and Mr. John Harris, and Mr. William Jones, youngest son. Oh, and the 2 flower girls were little Joan Harris and Betty Harris, sister and cousin respectively of the bride.
Little Joan Harris.
That's lovely because, you always think of ancestors who have passed away as being older people, and it's nice to read about it in the context of being a child as well. It just reminds you that everybody has had a childhood, doesn't it? They weren't always grown-ups. Laura, I have loved finding out these little pieces of information. It really makes you feel more whole as a person somehow. And it's been lovely to report back to Mum and Dad as well what's been found every week. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you for trusting me with it. It's been such a wonderful family to research.
Thank you very much. And until next time.
Until next time.